close your eyes for a second. Trust me, just close them. Now listen. What do you see when you hear this? Is it a late night with the boys when you have a test tomorrow? Is it a nice break from having to be a parent all evening after a long day of work? Or is it excitedly turning on your new Xbox with your new game that you got for Christmas? Or was it this? Well, regardless of what came to your mind, if you've clicked on this video, you've likely played at least one Halo game before. For some, like me, it was a massive part of my childhood, and foundational to some of my tastes in games. And how could it not? You've got an actually voiced and snarky protagonist, an even sassier AI companion, cool aliens to fight with weapons you've never seen before, and it's all taking place in such a cool and beautiful setting. Oh yeah, and don't forget about the added spice of our version of the zombie plague. Because Halo was such a big part of my childhood, there are a lot of really fond memories I have of the franchise, running throughout all the games that Bungie made. And after experiencing Call of Duty for the first time on my stream, twitch.tv/doublelucky, I was encouraged to see how Halo holds up by my chat, and so as of 1 week ago when I am writing this script, I set out to replay the original Halo games made by Bungie to see just how much they hold up, even after my view of FPS games has shifted. This video aims to answer the question of, is Halo as good as I remembered? And while I still will try to be analytical, I'll make it clear right now that this video is going to be a bit of a mishmash of everything, including retrospective and review style stuff. Obviously, there will be spoilers for Halos 1, 2, 3, and ODST, and Reach. Much of the footage you'll be seeing here was recorded live on my Twitch channel, and if you want to see me play more games you think are cool, come stop by and maybe I will. But for right now, let's jump into hell. So the order of events in the original Halo games isn't necessarily in chronological order. The events of the series goes Reach, then Combat Evolved, then 2, then ODST, then 3. Starting in Halo Reach, you play as a member of Noble Team, as number 6, with you and your team discovering that a fleet of Covenant known as the Winter Contingent have come to completely glass the planet. For the first 3 quarters of the game, you'll go on missions meant to drive the Covenant back and defend Reach, with the occasional saving of soldiers or civilians. In the latter 25% of the game, you learn that Dr. Halsey, who you have a complicated relationship with, has found a super advanced AI deep underneath Reach that was developed by something she describes as developed by something neither human nor Covenant. Once you defend her and acquire this AI, who looks rather familiar if you ask me, your final mission is to deliver this AI to the Pillar of Autumn, and all along this journey, you and your entire team are killed by the Covenant, one by one. Once the mission is completed and Reach falls, our story transitions to the Pillar of Autumn, where our series protagonist, John Halo, meets up with this AI named Cortana, and discovers that en route away from Reach, the Covenant have congregated around a strange structure orbiting a planet, and you could say that it looks almost a bit like a Halo. The Covenant, however, always have a bone to pick with humanity, and force us to do a crash landing onto Halo. While there, John Halo must rescue all of the soldiers from the Pillar of Autumn while also discovering both the secrets of Halo and why the Covenant are there. Turns out, Halo is both a galaxy-annihilating superweapon and also a containment facility for this universe's version of the zombie plague, the Flood. So to prevent both all life from being wiped off the face of the galaxy, and also to prevent all life from becoming a collective mound of pus and mold, John Halo must go through the entire game in reverse this time in order to detonate the Pillar of Autumn and destroy Halo. But despite the destruction of Halo being successful, there were many survivors that weren't just those that escaped. In Halo 2, we meet our secondary protagonist, an elite who may have had a name before the events of Halo, but after being prosecuted and anointed by the hierarchs of the Covenant, will forever now be the Arbiter. Halo 2 has you flip-flop between our two protagonists, John's campaign, involving chasing down the hierarchs in an attempt to kill them, and prevent them from firing off the Halo rings for their great journey, And the Arbiter's campaign involves hunting down a heretic elite who actually knows the hierarchs are bad news. Both of their stories collide when they become captured by the Gravemind, which is the collective consciousness of the Flood, and it instructs them to prevent the Prophet of Truth from detonating the Halo rings. The Arbiter then goes to kill the head brute who captured 343 Guilty Spark and the human soldiers, while Chief goes to dismantle the Covenant fleet and kill the Prophet of Truth so they can...
finishing this fight.
Meanwhile, back on Earth, the Covenant have been invading Earth and have been doing a major number on the planet. So while there are no spawns to take care of the mess, it's up to the ODST to be the Earth's last line of defense.
In Halo ODST, you switch between the perspectives of almost every member of your team, save for Dare, aka Veronica. All of ODST takes place over the course of 6 in-game hours, starting from your team trying to get onto the Covenant ship, to having the entire city be in complete ruins, to rescuing a member of a race of super intelligent snake things that the Covenant were keeping as, let's just say, unpaid interns. The main plot you experience is flashbacks of what was going on with each character while separated until they all reunite and are just trying to survive rather than taking down the Covenant. But once that little alien is rescued and the frankly unnecessary romance subplot is resolved, we cut back to Chief landing on Earth, discovering just how badly the Covenant has been messing things up, but also how well humanity has been dealing with it. Once you meet back up with a full military force, you can help minimize the Covenant impact on your area, but guess who shows up? That's right, it's the Flood. And pretty much as soon as the ship containing the Flood crashes, the entire city becomes infective nigh immediately. Now Chief and the Arbiter need to clear a path through the infected city and catch up with the Covenant fleet that had went through the portal towards the Ark, which is a location billions of light years away from our galaxy that acts as the main control center to ignite all of the Halo rings. There is where we have our final confrontations and bitter struggles against the Covenant trying to protect their hierarchs so they can initiate the Great Journey, and the Flood, because the Flood is always going to be around and make sure that it doesn't get the short end of the stick. When the final moment comes, Chief and the Arbiter manage to stop the Halo rings from firing, kill the Prophet, save Cortana, because she was left behind on the Flood-inflicted Covenant planet, and escape in one of the most iconic missions in the franchise, if not games of the 2000s. Now, why did I just bother giving the SparkNotes version of the story across all the definitely just 5 Halo games? Well, because if you're like me and played Halo back when only specific moments or images fill your brain, then this may be a good refresher for you. Looking back, the only things I actually remembered about the campaigns of Halo 1 through Reach was flying a Banshee into Canyon during Combat Evolved, the Flood chasing me, which was probably the library, specifically playing co-op with my family on this one mission in Halo 3 where you have to defend a human base from the Covenant, and the Lone Wolf mission from Halo Reach. I never played ODST, so there's no memories that could be had there, but considering I was told it connects to the story of Halo 3, I felt it prudent to play. So now that's out of the way, let's go over what actually makes these games as iconic as they are, both the good and the bad. Starting off with Halo 1, or Combat Evolved as it's properly titled, it came out on November 15th, 2001. During this time, Doom wasn't even a decade old yet, and at the time, you had the beginnings of many of the most well-known FPS games or franchises out there, such as Quake, Duke Nukem, Half-Life, Team Fortress, and Deus Ex. Halo was coming into a world with some stiff competition before even Call of Duty came out, which was a shock to me when I found that out. And now, I was gonna say how Halo revolutionized a lot of how FPS games were played, thinking all of them were just Doom and Quake, but yeah, I can't do that now.
The reason this game was so popular is because it had missions like this. Every other shooter at the time was just some random corridor shooter like Doom.
Ah, but here you actually like progress through.
There's like a big open area, like coming out of that pod for people with an open sandbox was like insane.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter because even for someone who is spoiled from Destiny 2 having constantly recharging superpowers and the unholy and ineffable sprint button, the original Halo still holds up. Chief is a largely silent protagonist, but he's actually pretty witty and has some good one-liners or conversations with the rest of the cast, which all also have great voice acting.
Nice shot!
Yep, I'm dealing with the brutes.
Knock your ass loose! Or is it already? I can't tell.
Or is it already? I can't tell. And with how you're constantly picking up new weapons, the grunts being little goofy guys, and the fact that you have shields that will protect your HP before taking permanent damage, all lends the game to having a great pacing and a sense of both the developers having fun and wanting the players to have that kind of fun as well. Halo 1 had 10 missions in total, all of which should theoretically take no more than half an hour if you're playing on normal difficulty. Theoretically. While roughly half of these missions have very unique environments and really well paced and balanced encounters that let you have as much control and fun as you want, the other half is, it's a little rougher. The longest and most difficult missions you'll be going through with Halo are Assault the Control Room, the Library, and 2 Betrayals. This is because ACR is just naturally long in the first place due to the constant repeats of essentially the same room for what feels like 10 minutes too long. For 2 Betrayals, you go through the level in reverse, but this time with the Flood and much deadlier Covenant enemies dealing with you. And then there's the Library. Yep, this way.
The energy field of province contains the index. We must get up there.
Get up there? Oh, great. Hang on. Ow!
Energy field of province contains the index. We must get up there.
Ow. Oh, and he got me with a shotgun when I had no shield. Yeah, no. The Library is the hardest section of the game, and I took probably twice as long as the power time due to how brutal the Flood is. And that actually is a great opportunity for me to talk about the enemies in this game. One thing that stuck out to me across all of my Halo play sessions on stream was that the enemies not only try to avoid your shots or your grenades, but they actually communicate with each other about it, shouting things like, "Grenade!" and then reacting accordingly. Grunts will run around scared that they're gonna die and it could get you more kills than you were expecting, and an elite could either dive out of the way or actually rush you with a grenade stuck to them, or they and brutes will stand there and let out a battle cry before getting annihilated by the grenade. While the AI of the enemies in Halo, or at least Combat Evolved, may not be the best, it definitely feels the most alive in terms of how the enemies operate. Now when it comes to the Flood, they sort of take all that and throw it out the window. Even for it being the first game, you will be constantly swarmed by Flood enemies, ranging from the little balloon guys, whose sole job is to keep your shields from regenning, to the more soldier-like enemies with weapons, one of which is the rocket launcher. I now know there's a rocket launcher guy. I'm gonna avoid the rocket launcher. The 2 most deadly enemies in this game are the Flood with a shotgun and the Flood with a rocket launcher. They are quite a large reason why the Library and 2 Betrayals took me so long to do. But honestly, even despite the older graphics, or how there are some enemies that cause massive problems for me, the only real complaint I have about Halo 1 is just that those missions I mentioned earlier are kind of repetitive and can easily be shortened by 10 minutes minimum. Other than that, the game is incredible even for its age, and it's a fantastic start to the franchise. Moving on to Halo 2, there are already quite a few improvements that it offers. First off, the one that the game will outright tell you is that you can dual-wield guns now. This feature is pretty cool as it lets you really pump out the range DPS with certain guns while also feeling like a badass. Next is that it got rid of the normal health bar you had in Halo 1, replacing it entirely with just your shields, and the fact you can take, quote-unquote, just a few hits while the shields are down. This saves you from having to run around to find a med pack or hide if your health is incredibly low. And the last big change was that they removed fall damage. You may not notice that change if you play smart, but as someone whose number one enemy is gravity, it felt like once Chief's ankles were no longer made of cheap plastic, I felt with all these changes, it allows for the game to be much more fast-paced and offer a Rambo style of gameplay. Not only that, but there were some other fun additions to the game's arsenal, such as the Covenant Carbine, or the Brute Shot, or my second favorite weapon in the franchise, the Energy Sword. And don't worry, we'll be seeing my favorite weapon when we get to Halo 3. But not only were the core mechanics improved and the different weapons introduced, like I said during the story summary, there will be sections of Halo 2 where you'll be playing as the Arbiter. The main differences in his missions is that you'll be using Covenant weapons a lot more than human ones, but that does include plasma grenades, so that's just a straight improvement. And instead of having a flashlight, like how Chief has to use a grand total of 4 or something times, you have an invisibility button, which unlike in Halo Reach, lets you remain invisible while moving. And because of that, I managed to rush through many of the Arbiter missions hardly engaging in combat. Now, as far as the Arbiter missions go, they are kind of the weakest point to this specific Halo game for me. They have a similar issue with the long missions in Halo 1, where they overstay their welcome. But thankfully, this time it's only by a little. The key example I have is during the mission, The Arbiter, and specifically the segment where you have to fly the Banshee. Difficulty aside, it feels like the mission waits for what feels like 5 extra minutes between each progress point, be it a new wave or your allied ship moving to the next spot where the mission can continue. Even if it may not have been that long, it most certainly felt like I was waiting a lot more than I was doing stuff. And on top of that, there was a technical issue I had with the audio in this segment, so I had to switch over to the remastered version of the game, which brings me to my next point. So Halo 1 and 2 both got a remaster for their anniversary editions, which you can switch to or back to the original versions with the mere press of the tab button if you're playing on PC. The remastered versions basically revamped every aspect of the games that falls under fidelity: the sound effects, the visuals, the cutscenes, the general sound design, and the soundtrack. Now obviously everyone has their tastes and preferences. Some people prefer what's newest and more refined, and I totally get that. There are some elements that I do think are straight up unquestionable upgrades, like the Gravemind. But after having watched Bricky and Matara play through Halo 2 with the remastered cutscenes and music, I just feel as though that the remasters overdid it. There was a quirkiness and charm to the old cutscenes that feels lost in pursuit of spectacle and fidelity with the remasters, and the soundtrack, at least as far as what it sounded like in their videos and in that one segment of the Arbiter mission, it just felt way too loud and in my face the whole time. But thankfully, it's all up to the player if they want to experience either the older style or the newer one, and they have the ability to switch with just the press of a button. But still, Halo 2 took what was already good about the original Halo and cranked it all the way up to 11 with its action and its overall difficulty. Seriously though, fighting through High Charity with all the brutes was insane. And even that aside, the game still came out great and incredibly enjoyable despite it having a rushed development cycle, which I only learned about from Bricky mentioning it. And now I could pull a dick move and end this video on a cliffhanger like Halo 2 did before Halo 3 was released 3 years later, but I'm not. So Halo 3 is both its own game, but it also has a prequel, I guess, in the form of Halo 3 ODST. I mentioned it in the story overview because as I was playing Halo 3 on stream, a member of my chat said how ODST takes place during the Covenant invasion before Chief shows up. We'll cover that in a bit, seeing as though it was released after Halo 3, just a year before Reach. In Halo 3, it takes place shortly after Chief returns to Earth and he's crash landed in the jungle, thankfully with Johnson still there. When the mission starts, you're given an assault rifle. And why do I bring this up? Because for some reason in Halo 2, they didn't have the assault rifle. It was replaced with the SMG. Now at the end of the day, a guy who doesn't care about guns like me isn't gonna sweat the differences between the two of them. I just missed that sick-ass design that the assault rifle had, and was really happy to see it come back in Halo 3, and was confused why it left in Halo 2 to begin with. But that doesn't matter, because as was a trend when going from Halo 1 to 2 with seeing the energy swords and not getting to use them, then with Halo 2 to 3, you see Tartarus using his gravity hammer in the cutscenes, as well as his boss fight, Bungie delivered again. Now yes, they added more weapons than just the gravity hammer, but those weapons don't matter because the gravity hammer is the best weapon in the entire game, and I will not be hearing otherwise. Anyways, Halo 3 basically just does everything Halo 2 did to 1, but to 2. The main spotlight is how much better the enemies are. The brutes no longer take a grenade, a shooting range worth of bullets, and an entire MMA boxing match to take down. Hunters have way less exploitable attack patterns at this point, and the Flood have some new buddies such as Hulks, Spider Guys, and the Needler with legs. Not only that, but because of the generation that Halo 3 was made for being after Halo 2, the enemy density is much, much higher. So on the one hand, you get a sense of wading through hordes of Covenant or the Flood, but on the other hand, with some enemies being either very accurate or having strong weapons, such as the Flood with a shotgun, it can put a lot of pressure on you. This is especially true for the second to last mission, where you have to enter the now infested High Charity to save Cortana, and how you can't go more than 3 seconds without dozens of floods swarming you. Speaking of the missions, it felt as though that Halo 3 is one of, if not the shortest of all the original Halo games. It took me 8 or so hours to complete Halo 1 across 2 streams, 7 hours for Halo 2, also across 2 streams, and Halo 3, ODST, and Reach each took me what would be 1 stream each at about 4 to 5 hours. Not only that, but unlike Halo 2, you don't get to experience the Arbiter story alongside Chief, and can only play as him in Player 2 for co-op. Despite that, the campaign is fast-paced and high-action, so it still felt fulfilling to go through, especially during the more difficult sections, such as the 2 Scarabs, or entering High Charity, and of course, we can't forget the iconic escape sequence. This way! A narrow passage? Easy. I can make it. Let's go! No, don't flip! You're not gonna flip! You're not gonna flip to where I have to flip you again! No! Fuck! Ignore that last bit. The point is that the mission is awesome, and it caps off the game expertly. And after all that, we get to mourn the loss of Master Chief, as he alludes to the dark future that will soon come. Now, going over to ODST real quick, because it is essentially an expansion to Halo 3 as far as I'm concerned, even if it may be a whole nother game. I went over the story during the overview at the start. You play through the perspectives of nearly everyone on your ODST team to fend off the Covenant invasion, interspersed with you playing as the Rookie, finding your team in the abandoned and ruined city. All this leading up to rescuing an engineer from the Covenant, which leads to its information being shared with the rest of the army and Chief when he arrives. I honestly think that the story of ODST is actually pretty cool. It gives a sense of tragedy and a slowly worsening situation as you fight against the dying of the light in the city. The flashbacks imply things being worse and worse, and you couple that with the S+ tier soundtrack, it really lends a bleak tone to the game. Now that may be contradictory to how Halo has been up to this point, but it's all a matter of contrast. Going from high-octane action and camaraderie to a bleak and solemn exploration of a ruined city creates such an impactful experience, in my opinion. The biggest issue of the story for me is that there's a romantic subplot between your teammates, Buck and Veronica. I'm not quite sure if I'd be okay with it existing at all, because the way it's handled is already so bad, in that Veronica and Buck had a falling out, and Buck wants to make it up to her, but Veronica ain't having any of it, and it's just so annoying to me personally. And now as far as the gameplay is concerned, it mostly is just Halo 3, but with some weird choices. First off, they do bring back having shields and health that you have to heal, except here your shields are stamina, and they deplete pretty quickly. This would normally be no big deal, but the weird thing they did is that they made it so you have no indication of your remaining stamina, instead having your screen turn progressively redder, which leaves you to guessing entirely when your health will start taking damage. On top of that, they had the game be more menu focused, in that you have a data log and a map that you access through a menu, when that was never the case in previous Halo games. While this would have been intrusive, thankfully you have the now commonplace compass at the top of your screen with the mission markers, so you rarely have to open the menu. There are some good things though with it, with how throughout the city you can find recordings of events that were happening shortly before the Covenant invaded, basically acting as audio logs you'd find in something like BioShock. And now, the whole reason I played it was because I was told its story connected to Halo 3, and I felt that would be helpful for the retrospective. But it hardly does. The most connection it has is the event in the timeline being the Covenant invading, and the plot element is used in Halo 3. Overall, I'd just say that ODST is a weird addition to the already iconic and epic experience that is Halo 3. And so now we move on to the last Halo game ever made. Yep, last one ever made. Bungie has never made another Halo game ever again. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't say anything bad about the 343 Halo games, because I haven't played them. But it is true that Halo Reach was the last game of the series made by Bungie, and boy howdy, was it one hell of a send-off to the franchise. It's my personal belief that after having played all of Bungie's Halo games, that Reach was the absolute peak of their craft at the time. It finally tuned your health and shields to where the pacing of any combat encounter is never too slow, unless you're truly terrible. It has the largest selection of unique weapons that you can use. It has easily available and switchable power-ups that, other than the holy sprint button, all had good uses that you could find opportunities for, adding another level of depth to player choice. Every mission involved a vastly different gameplay experience, ranging from a stealth sniper mission to flying a fucking fighter jet in space, engaging in dogfights with Covenant ships. And it had a cast of very likable characters that, even in the short span of time that we knew them, were endearing enough that we could at least feel something when they all inevitably die horribly. Huh. I feel like I summed it up pretty well there, honestly. Normally I ramble about stuff, but that is pretty much what made Reach so good, save for the multiplayer, but we'll get to that. Seriously though, you may not be Mr. John Halo, 100% Himalayan ultra badass, but in Reach, you get to do all the same badass power fantasy stuff you could do in Halos 1 through 3, but even more so as your own custom Spartan with all the bells and whistles I mentioned earlier. All the while, you're fighting a losing battle, having each of your close allies die one by one in this brutal war, until eventually you succumb as well. You'd think that'd be deflating, having your power fantasy end in failure, but for me, personally, it sparked the sense of rebellion and wanted to keep pushing forward. In the narrative sense, it's because the Covenant were all being a bunch of dicks, but also in the gameplay sense, that you get to basically be the sci-fi equivalent of Kukulane, being a one-man army until an overwhelming force brings you down. So yeah, that is Halo Reach, my personal favorite Halo game. And that's about it, at least as far as what I noticed and could remember. So, now let's move on to the multiplayer. So, I played on the Master Chief Collection, which lets you choose which game's multiplayer you want to have installed, and you'll be able to queue up for all of them, or just some specifics. Now, I didn't download the multiplayer for all of the games because this was mainly a nostalgia-thon, where I looked to see if what I played is as good as I remembered it. And this means that I had the Halo 3 and Reach multiplayer installed. The first thing that you'll be doing, or rather, should be doing when it comes to Halo multiplayer, is customizing your Master Chief and your Reach Spartan. The colors largely don't matter because unless you choose free-for-all game modes, then the colors will just end up being red or blue for teams. Although you should still choose the colors for your Reach Spartan because you actually get to see those in the cutscenes. And once you're done choosing through your somewhat limited array of starting customization options and color palettes, you'll get to choose your game modes. There's far too many to cover extensively, but to sum it up, you've got skill-based ones such as pistols or battle rifles being insta-kill headshots. You've got objective-based ones like King of the Hill, and you've got the creative and pure fun ones like Infection, Golf, and Griffball, which are the best game modes, and I will not hear otherwise. Anyways, I did the multiplayer for about 3 hours on stream to record footage for this section, and one thing I noticed was the following. First off, I was on the Xbox Live matchmaking, which meant I was likely playing with and against people that were exclusively playing on Xbox, because I was practically the only one playing on mouse and keyboard. I don't know if aim assist still exists or not, but I would imagine it does, so that could explain a fair portion of the skill difference between me and the other players. The second thing I noticed is that when I had every game mode option selected, most of my games were those precision-based modes where you get insta-kills on headshots using the battle rifle or pistol. The reason I kept getting these the most likely is because when you complete a multiplayer match, you're rewarded with rank XP based on various aspects of that match, one of which being headshots. So my guess is that the game doesn't calculate XP differently between game modes. This leads to players queuing up for those game modes specifically so they can get the most efficient XP per hour. If I'm wrong on this, please do educate me in the comments. Now, once I had my fill of those game modes, I went on to the ones I absolutely remembered and still love to this day. There are several custom game modes that are all official in the Master Chief Collection, but the two that I remember spending hours and hours on as a kid were Griffball and Infection. Infection is Halo's version of zombies, where a certain number of players are marked as zombies and are given an infinite energy sword. If they kill a non-zombie player who's given a shotgun, then that player becomes a zombie, and it's a race to see if the humans can survive for long enough before getting zombified. I have fond memories of this game mode where at one point I was just back-to-back blasting zombies, rushing out of the air vents with a shotgun and getting 20-something kills before finally being taken down. Dinner was ready right as I finished. When it comes to Griffball, it's a lot more simple. You've got a ball in the center of an arena, and everyone's given a gravity hammer and an energy sword. And if you play the Reach version, you also get to choose a loadout that determines your defenses as well as your power-up. One guy picks up the ball and runs to the enemy's goal to dunk the ball, and everyone else has to bonk each other or that guy's teammates to defend your goal. This game mode is the best because it uses the gravity hammer, which is the best weapon in the game, don't at me. So overall, I did have a really good time reliving some of what made multiplayer so fun for me as a kid. But gamers will be gamers and optimize the fun out of a lot of things in the pursuit of fast and easy progression. Not only that, but if aim assist still exists, then you definitely need to play with people using the same control setup as you if you're not a giga pro at FPS games, or else you'll just get obliterated and be basically a dead weight for your team. Other than that, it's still the same old good fun I remember having as a kid. So all in all, I had an absolute blast with revisiting Halo. I was actually kind of afraid of how I would feel about it, considering the original reason I did all of this was because I had an awful experience playing World at War for the first time, but thankfully those fears didn't come true. I've said it on stream, I've said it here, and I'll say it again. Bungie had fun making Halo. They made sure the player had fun too, even if some moments of the game are harder than others, or the story may be a bit more bleak and sad at some points. I'm incredibly thankful my dad got me Halo when I was a kid, because this series really is a true cornerstone of games in general, and I'm thankful to my chat for both encouraging me and supporting me to be able to replay it and relive some of my childhood. So if you haven't played Halo in decades like I have, maybe it's time to go back and relive those awesome moments. And if you haven't played Halo but sat through this video, then now's your chance to make your own memories by playing the game. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you for watching the video for however long you did. It means a lot to me. And I hope you'll consider liking, subscribing, and yada yada yada. If you have the time, come catch me on Twitch. I'd love to have you. But for now, you all have a great day, and remember Reach.